Today, we're diving into a topic that's often pushed into the shadows, but which Dr. Hauser argues is absolutely central to our health, resilience, and even longevity. And that's our sexuality. Dr. Juliana is a therapist, educator, sex therapist, sexpert, I should say, and the author of a new position on sex. She's been called your best friend with a PhD, which gives you a sense of both her warmth and her wisdom. Dr. Juliana, welcome to It's a Jungle.
Oh, it's so good to see you again.
Likewise. Listen, there was so much for me to unpack with your book. So whilst I feel like I've read it, it's a work in progress. You know, now I'm actually trying to do some of these. So maybe we could just, if we could start just first before just backing up a little bit before your book. I feel like that wellness culture gives us so many, optimization tips from exercise to diet, to supplements, but mental health often ends up as a footnote. So for people who are just too depressed and overwhelmed, how do they get started?
I'm so appreciative of you focusing on that question, that topic too, because it is a lot of a hurdle that I have to overcome in order to speak about mental health in the wellness space. And I'm a huge proponent in the wellness space. Like I it's obviously very important to us. I just want to make sure that mental health is included in it, because when I'm working with people and I am seeing how much pressure they feel to do all the things that they're seeing, like exercising and getting on the right supplement regime and eating the correct way, but they actually can't get out of bed, I know that we're putting too many things ahead of what really needs to be the foundation. And so what I think has to happen is we have to have somebody that is either literally or figuratively sitting next to you and saying, let's start, let's change the mountain and start looking at the pebble. Let's look at one thing at a time, the next thing that's right in front of you. And instead of doing like the optimizing, like that oftentimes the wellness community is speaking about, which again has its place and is beautiful, we have to look at stabilizing. So let's stabilize it through one breath at a time, or one issue at a time, one call, one moment of connection. And I think that really makes a difference of placing it within the wellness community.
Oh, thank you so much. It's so wonderful. And that is such important advice, because there is so many people out there who just, they will struggle to get started and get completely overwhelmed by the optimization of everything. So you've called sexuality the final frontier of self-development. So what stops so many people from exploring this part of themselves?
Well, I mean, the first thing is that it's still, and this amazes me, but it's still very taboo. And when you have a topic that's taboo, people are afraid to say something that's risk taking and be, quote, wrong about it. Our sexual culture often positions sex as something that is right or wrong, and you are usually never right, at least in one person's eyes. And so when you know that it's a risk to share, you know that it is a taboo topic, and it is something that is really divisive for most people and relationships and cultures, then it becomes something that you put off because it's scary. And when it's taboo, it means you haven't had a lot of space to do it. You haven't had a lot of language in which to talk about it. So we put it off, because when you have a list of everything that you have to do and everything you need to be focusing on, we have positioned it as a luxury instead of a necessity until it's not. Or until you're exposed to a different way of looking at sex and sexuality, and you see that it's a way of figuring out who you are instead of just sex acts. And when that happened to me, when I discovered that sexuality was actually like one of the truest ways to know who you are, and it's a pathway to yourself, and it's an expression of yourself, if you look at it holistically instead of just in like a narrow lane of sex acts, then everything made sense. And my work as a therapist combined with my work as a sex educator all just kind of made it work into one way of looking at it that we hadn't been able to look at before.
Yeah. So something I loved reading your book was that thought of it's almost like you're never too old to start learning. Like sex education is something you actually need to be proactive about almost throughout your life. So anybody who's watching or listening to this, it doesn't actually matter what age you are, because it's never too late to start. And also you need to keep re-educating yourself on that.
Can I give an example of that? That I've seen. So current time, so I do a lot of work in the menopause space, as you know, and when I'm working with a woman who is experiencing, we'll say like, vaginal pain, and one of the treatments for that is cream. So estrogen cream is something that a vaginal cream that you can use that sometimes will be prescribed. And I will see this reticence. They don't want to think about putting cream on their labia. And when I start unpacking that, knowing that the potential benefits of that are stopping recurring UTIs or stopping the pain so that they can enjoy sexual interactions, they are, because they haven't had years and years of not being sex educated, years and years of not talking about it, years of it being shameful to speak about their genitals or speak about wanting to be sexually active, prevents them 40 years later from being able to have a treatment that is so easy and has such a great efficiency of changing symptoms. That is something that you don't think about, that if you're not getting sex educated properly in your teens or your 20s, will have ripple effects for you when you are in your 60s and 70s and even before that. And I see it all the time.
Yeah, and I know it's true because I've also experienced it through myself and through friends and family, and but amazing that you are arming everybody with information in this book, and because that's what we need. So something that you really talk about a lot is sexual agency. So could you explain to us, what does sexual agency actually mean in real life?
Yes. So the shortest way to describe it is that sexual agency is learning your terms and then learning how to live your terms. There are other words that you can put in that are related to it, like sovereignty or like self ownership. But really, what I'm speaking about is learning what your yeses and nos are, and within a sexual context, learning what your yums and your yucks are, and and when you dial that back, it's looking at how well do you know yourself, and if you know yourself well, then do you know what your likes and your dislikes, what your wants, what your needs, and do you know how to express that and communicate it? Do you know that you have the right to do so and the responsibility to communicate it, and for you to really check in with their ripple effects of when I activate my agency, and can I stand in the truth of who I am next to somebody else or maybe many other people, and say, this is what I need and this is what I want, and I'm interested in what you need and what you want, and let's figure out that either ease together or that conflict together, because we both deserve to have a relationship that has dignity, that's based in the truth of who we are.
It's so beautiful, and you speak so beautifully that it sounds in some ways so simple. But like listening to you, and you talk about using phrases like, that you feel like you have the right to know. Like, this is something that I know, talking to aunts and people in the generation like ahead of me before, that I feel like that would never even have crossed their minds that they would have that right to. And it's it has to be addressed, because it's true. And then I think we all, when we look at ourselves, it's such a powerful thought. Such a powerful thought. So thank you for sharing that, because I have to admit, I had never really contemplated that explicitly till I read your words.
Yeah. Oh, I appreciate you saying that. And honestly, me too. I feel really grateful that I was I was able to compile so many stories, and it really began with asking women, young women, stories. And I started hearing the theme of not knowing how to make a decision, especially within a sexual context. And when I kept hearing themes of it just happened, or, I really just, I just kind of went along with things, and realizing that even just having a pause to say, do I want to be doing this? Is this what I want? Versus even like now, like being able to teach people how to do this way before you're in a sexual context, and you are sitting with purpose and intention, saying, "Who am I, and what do I want?" And realizing you have the audacity to ask that is pretty mind blowing, and also still so far away for a lot of people too.
Would you be able to share a story, anonymous, of course, of somebody whose life was transformed by embracing sexual agency?
Yeah, so I have a lot of examples, and of all genders, and frankly of all ages. So it's something that we were talking about earlier about looking at who you are as a sexual being has no ending point in our timeline. But I'm thinking of this one woman who she'd been in a marriage for about 25 years and felt pretty happy in the marriage. But as life kind of started unfolding, she really started feeling like it was dulling, and she really felt a difference in her vibrancy in life. And as we started working together, I introduced the concept of agency to her. And similar to what you said, she was like, huh, like it makes sense, but I haven't heard it said like that. And I like what you're saying. Like, I want to enact it, but I'm a little nervous about it. And it feels like this could change things in my relationship. How do I introduce this to my husband and my kids and things? And so, well, let's not worry about that yet. Let's start with like, what does this mean for you now? And then we'll figure out what the ripple effects of it are. And so she started doing it. And we started within the first pillar of holistic sexuality, which was sensuality. And we just started asking like, what are her senses? What are the yeses and nos within each of the senses? And we learned like where she had hesitations, where she didn't know the answers. And that became a really powerful point of when she didn't know what a yes or a no was, she really shut down. And as we learned to push through that and learn to like be curious about it, and to look forward to all three answers, the yes, the no, and the I don't know, she changed. And it got to the point that I wouldn't even have to ask the question. She'd be like, okay, I already know this is a yes. And this one is I don't know. And I'm going to have to research and find out, and I'll get back to you. And when I saw that growing in her, and growing in this place of, I want to get to know me I wanted to get to know me deeper. And I get to know me again of who I am right now. And instead of seeing the changes that were happening in her life as a loss, it was an opportunity to reintroduce herself, like a rediscovery. And when she made that framing shift, her relationship didn't get worse. It actually got a lot better. And she felt better about who she was, and felt less invisible to her husband. And it doesn't always happen. Sometimes when you get into this work, you realize that you're not as well matched as you perhaps thought you were. But in her case, her partner was like, great, like, welcome to meet you again. And also, I want to figure out me too. And they ended up doing this together, which was beautiful. It started happening at work. She ended up going to her boss, and with a very different level of confidence said, I'm not happy with this position nor this pay, and I'm okay walking away if that doesn't change, if you can't make it change. And I'd like the opportunity to stay with these differences. And she got a yes to that. Again, that doesn't always happen. I don't want to sell agency as this magical thing that fixes it all. But the word that she kept using is, this used to feel like I had someone who did this had audacity. Now I know it's somebody who has agency, and there is a relationship between the two, but agency feels so much better. And she had children that had gone off to college, and she was able to set different boundaries with them. And instead of it upsetting the people in her life, it ended up inspiring people, and they felt really grateful to get to know the truth of her instead of the hidden hidden part of her.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Juliana. Where you were talking about in your book, where you were talking about boundaries are about me, agency is about we. Could you
Yes.
explain that a little?
Yeah. So I love it that you pulled that line, because it is really crucial. So in that there is a pathway towards agency, and it starts with boundaries. That is boundaries that you give to other people. Then it's boundaries that you keep to yourself. So an example of that is, you can't speak to me like that is the first one. The second boundary, within yourself, which is I'm not going to stay in a relationship with somebody who speaks to me like that. Then usually when you get to the place of having the experience of standing up for yourself and also having people respect your boundaries, you stay there enjoying your voice, which then leads you to empowerment. And empowered people are amazing. We need to hear people's voices. We need to hear people that are talking about what they need and what they want, and knowing the truth of who they are. It's beautiful, but I'm a couples therapist also. And so I see on a very individual level that when someone is empowered, when they have their voice, it's beautiful next to another person who is empowered and has their voice, until there's a conflict of needs and wants, which invariably happens in any kind of relationship that has depth to it. And where I found is that empowerment ends there because it's so individual. It needs to be individual, but we need to take the next step, which to me is agency, which is relational. And agency says, here's who I am. I've done the work to know who I am and what I need and what I want. And I've created a space for you to be somebody who knows who they are and knows what they need and what they want. And let's talk about the ripple effects together. And that doesn't mean that you abandon yourself. It doesn't mean that you have to compromise your voice and your needs and your wants. But what it says is we have to be the we in this. We have to look at who we are, and our needs and wants aren't just in a bubble. They do affect people in our lives, and they have ripple effects beyond just two people. Often our decisions go culturally or through community or even through countries. And when you see people who don't think in a relational way, you see a very big breakdown in relationships and frankly, countries.
I love the relational aspect in life in general, whether you're working in a team for anything, when women understand the relational aspect of agency. And I loved this. So would you mind just explaining what you mean by that? And then what that power, why that is unstoppable when women do.
It is, because I think women inherently are connectors. And we know that our relationships feed us. There's tons of studies that show that our relationships have a huge connection with our longevity. And so when we understand just inherently that who we are and what we do and what our decisions are affect other people, then it's incredible how that's not a divisive thing, that it actually is something that makes us united. And when we're united, and frankly, when women are in agency around other women who are in agency, I have seen mountains move, truly. And that is mountains that move in a relationship, that move in the communities at schools or policy changes. And I've seen it change in countries, truly. And I see the opposite. Also, when that's not in place, I see how devastating it can be for relationships and a larger scale in communities and colleges or countries. And women get it. Women get it inherently, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing to witness. What can be hard is when that's silenced.
There was a paragraph in your book around how when societies deny holistic sexual education, we see rises in everything from divorce rates to sexual violence to deaths by suicide. Mm-hmm. So how does this individual sexual agency connect to the broader societal problems?
Yeah, I wondered how people would respond to that paragraph. And there are parts of me, I was like, I could just see, me sitting in a forum and someone like, prove it, show it. And so I made sure I had all the studies to back the statement.
I didn't doubt that for 1 second.
No, I know you're not. but I do, and again, I'm grateful. Like you've really done your research on the book, and I am so impressed and appreciate that. And that is something I thought a lot about, because I felt it in the work that I do. I see it in the work that I do, but oftentimes people don't want anecdotal responses. They want to see hard science that is measuring this. And so they exist, and it's why I felt good about putting the statements in there. But I want to back it up and say what I've seen, which is this: when you don't have this, when you don't have a culture that is based in solid sex education that is holistically bound, when you have a sex education and a culture that isn't based in agency, that is based in entitled people, or in empowered people who don't know how to look at it in the relational way, you see a huge increase in sexual violence. You see a huge increase of people not reporting. That's when I start seeing coming to people to me. I can go back on someone's timeline. Like I often, when I work with clients, we go through their timeline of what they've been through. And those, I can often correlate it of what's happening, especially in the US, what's happening politically, where we are, of where their harm points are. And it is remarkable when I see the opposite, which is when we see that there's more accessibility, there's more education, there's more inclusivity and more diversity as a pillar of legislation or a pillar of policies. Even if I'm just talking about at a school, let alone at a big country, it's always correlated with more positive things, because when a person and a group of people are living in the truth of who they are, they make decisions that are authentic and powerful, and they are not made in decisions of fear. And when people make decisions based in fear, you really come from a place of harm and negativity, which never is a good decision-making place, as opposed to truth and hope and positive energy. And it's remarkable, the difference. It's such an obvious point that it never ceases to surprise me that when you see scientific studies, when you see anecdotal evidence, that it doesn't change people's mind. I think people are very threatened by agency. Some people.
Yeah, thank you. Because I think one of the really critical things about your book, if I hope you don't mind me sort of paraphrasing this, is just how it really exemplifies to me why this work is so important that you've done here. Don't get me wrong, that you are, I felt I was going to describe you like a poet. It is beautiful prose. It's not often I read a book and there's paragraphs I would love to read out loud just to listen to the words, because you have such a beautiful way with words. But the content, just the guide, you talk about that you describe agency at one point as a well of resiliency that helped you survive your hardest times. Now, I'm acutely aware as well that the world might not be exactly how we want it to be. And as much as we want everybody to be living in the way that they want to be, it's not always possible. So I would love you to explain a little how developing your sexual agency, how it can become that kind of lifeline for somebody.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for those sweet words. That is really, I really appreciate your compliments, and I take that to heart. So in looking at resiliency, so I have a TED Talk that I speak about my journey towards agency, and it's many years that I've been working with the concept. And what I thought was like this wonderful step process of like, I want to teach people how to make decisions, because I didn't know how to do it, or I thought I did. And then when I started hearing all these stories, I realized I really didn't have a very in-depth way of taking control of my life and knowing what is the right decision. I was a people pleaser, and I went from just letting people be in control of who I was and what I was doing, and thought that was the way to do it. I thought, well, other people know better than I do. And when I look back on my timeline, every time that I made a decision, because I didn't want to upset somebody else, or I abandoned myself and my own self-worth and view of something, my instinct on something, it always went to shit. It was never a good thing in my timeline. But when I did stand up for myself, or when I did, or I wasn't contested in my gut instinct, it felt really great. And I wanted that for other people. And so I thought that's what the work was. And then as I grew in my training as a therapist, and then as my practice, grew over years, I realized that most people's pain points when they came to me, not only was what I was talking about that's correlated with lack of agency in a culture, but it also was when they didn't have the resiliency to handle when life doesn't go how you expect it to, which was happening in my life at that time too, which was like, I knew agency. I was like, oh, I'm living with purpose and intention. I know who I am. And like, life is going to be great from now on. Like I felt like I had this superpower that, I thought it was the shield that was going to protect everything. And when it didn't, at first it was pretty crushing. And I was like, this is not what I signed up for, nor is this what I was teaching people. But what I realized was that it didn't protect me from others who weren't living in agency, because I wasn't looking out for that. Now I know how to look out for that. But the other thing was that it did give me resiliency, because one of the things that happens when life doesn't go as expected, when you have unintended consequences to decision making, even if it was done with purpose and intention, is you don't often know what to do. We're not given a class on, what's the next step after life has fallen apart. And if I am a planner, and when I have planned out every worst case scenario, and the one thing I didn't think of is what happens, and I don't know what to do. Like, call me. I'm great in a crisis, but pretty much only a crisis that I have foreseen, not like a crisis that was unexpected. It's like, this is for the birds. Like, I've got to figure it out. Agency gave me the format. Agency gave me the framework to be like, okay, here I go. Here's where I begin. What decision needs to be made, which is the first step of agency. And that agency became my North Star. So it is protective in a lot of ways, but it doesn't protect you from everything. And it is healing in retrospect, because I saw many places in my life, and I've seen this in many of my clients of, there are just times that we don't have all the information, or we have our agency taken from us, or we don't know the concept of agency that we have to do the healing from, and we can look back in agency now and with a much more compassionate view, and allow resiliency to build upon itself. Because what I've ultimately learned is agency is an act of self-trust. And the more you enact agency and follow your activated agency, the more you trust yourself, you trust your instinct, you make decisions, you live more in aligned with the truth of who you are, which builds trust and resiliency. And it becomes this beautiful cycle that is not impenetrable. It's not, because life can life to us, but I'm not nearly as thrown by those parts in my life, nor am I nearly as caught off guard in looking ahead. I also don't have to be on guard nearly as much, because I do know I have my true north through the framework of agency.
What I love is that you have all these exercises in your book as well, so that the rest of us can build all of this. So could I ask you just to, if you don't mind, just to briefly talk about, you have the different pillars in your book, what they are and how they connect to mental health, relationships, resilience.
Yeah. So I have 9 pillars that were first, 5 of them were first really brought into the light by Dr. Dennis Daly in 1981. And I updated them and changed them. And they are sensuality, wellness and fertility, pleasure, desire, intersecting identities, power and trauma. It is sex acts and interest, relationships, connections, and then everything is in the hub of agency. And then all of those 9 pillars interact with your soul line. So like, how well do you know yourself, and your timeline, which is where are you in your lifespan? And all of that together is it's a way with there's a specific lens of sexuality, but it's a 360 of who you are as a person. If you go through all 9 pillars, you've really looked at the wholeness of who you are with a wellness lens.
If there's a phrase that you use at the top of each exercise that I love, which is reveal yourself to yourself. I mean, that's so powerful, especially for those of us who are not used to doing, we've built a life a certain way, grown up a certain way. It just,
Yes. It's scary, right?
Yeah.
I think it is. I think it's the bravest of people who do the first phone call or, walk through the door of any kind of self-development, whether it's a therapy office or it's a wellness retreat or a wellness conference, because what you're really saying is when you walk through the door is, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what's waiting for me. I don't know exactly who I am or what this means. And you have to sit in this ambiguity, which is another part of agency. And it's why I use the word revealed, because I love the thought of unfolding. And I think that feels a lot less scary. And I think it is scary to get into self-development, but it's so worth it.
Did you mention in your book that Revealed, this is the name of a program and a course that you have run for many years in a community?
Yes. Yeah, it is. And it has had different names. It started off as Be Your Own Sexpert, which I loved at the time. And I really was like, it is it. Like, you should be your own expert. And my philosophy that as when I was a professor and as a therapist is that I have an expertise, but I'm not an expert over you. And I wanted my clients and my students to not be dependent on me. I wanted them to be in co-ownership of the self-discovery. So that's how I started with the Be Your Own Sexpert. But I started seeing through the work, and as I was doing it, because Revealed is in 8 countries and it's spoken in 5 different languages, and so I've been able to to see it play out in many different cultures and with a lot of diversity. And the word that in different forms kept coming up was, this was revealed to me. This is what this is revealing in me, and so I changed it to Revealed.
So for people who are deeply uncomfortable, even thinking of themselves as sexual beings, what's the first step for somebody who wants to explore this but doesn't know where to begin?
The first thing I want you to do is I want you to take out the thought of sex acts being the first step. It's what we associate with sexuality all the time. It's what you're doing with your body, and then the second thing is your orientation and with whom, and that's a part of it. But there's a reason why it's not the first thing that I have as one of the pillars. That sensuality is the first thing we do, and we're looking at who we are as sexual beings. So if you can do that, if you can put aside that being a sexual person means that you're being active with sex acts, if you do that, then everything else falls into place. And everyone is a sexual being if you're breathing. It is something that we all have in common. We all have a body and we all have a sexuality. We just aren't taught a broader way of looking at what sexuality is. So remove the preconception of what it is first. Then the second thing is really get curious. Learn to get comfortable with I don't know, and asking yourself. And anytime that you don't know the answer to something, like in the book, if it feels new to you or feels scary, or you see the chapter title and you're like, with that, just take a deep breath and say, this is going to be fun. This is going to be fun to discover it. And if you don't feel that way, then look at any video that I do talking about this and just imbue my enthusiasm. Because if I came from a family that was very conservative, and I came from a family that my father was a radiologist, my mother was an ER nurse. And so they saw the worst of everything. And bless them, they're wonderful people, and they were doing the best they could too. But I was not raised in this sexually free, environment. And the culture that I grew up in was very conservative as well. So if I can get to the place that I am talking, all over the world about sexuality without blushing, and in fact, I feel passionate about it, and I love hearing somebody's no just as much as I love hearing somebody's yes, and if my mother can go from fainting when she found out that I was having sex, then that's not an exaggeration. She literally fell down when she figured it out, to I just gave her my book this past week in hand, and she wanted to prop it up on the table. We were out to eat, and she wanted it sitting there, and it says sex right on the page. And if my mom can do that, then you can too. And everyone has a starting point, and there's no destination that's the right destination. All I ask you to do is just to start the journey with me.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And if there's a transformation story, wow, that is amazing. Oh my goodness, amazing. So, Julia, how does sexual agency then evolve very practically as our bodies change through aging, menopause, illness, or other life transitions?
Yeah, it's different for everybody, because agency is meant to have flexibility to it. It is meant to reflect the truth of who you are. But what I do see in general, when somebody is in agency, when you're seeing it grow within them, is they know what it feels like in their body to activate their agency. There is a peace that is alongside of it. And sometimes that piece is only a few seconds, because then you go into like the fear of the consequences of the decision that you've made and the agency that you've activated, but you can't get that confused. But when you start building on that place, like what I'll say to my clients is anchor that feeling. What name 3 things that you're feeling in your body now that you've activated your agency in this. And it's always some version of peace, groundedness, calmness. And if you anchor it, and then you start building like the scaffolding of what it feels like to have that versus anxiety and fear and sadness surrounding your life choices, then you start feeling it expand, because again, you breathe differently, and you build a self-trust. That when you build self-trust, especially in a topic as difficult as sexuality, then it goes into other areas of your life. And I start having my clients saying things like, people are like, "You're different. Like, what's different about you? Like, what's going on?" And some will say, like, "Are you having sex? Like, what? Like, this looks like somebody." Like, they'll joke about that part, which great. Like, I'm a proponent of great sex, fabulous. But sometimes it is actually about saying no, and it's about saying no to the kind of relationships or the kind of sex that actually really was never a yes for you, but you got in a habit of it. And it's saying no to people who really are a no to you. And it's saying no to behaviors that aren't really a true yes to you. And when you start living that, then you have a confidence about you. You have a peace about you. And I see people who, maybe you would view them as a pretty domineering personality, or a very, maybe someone who has kind of oppressive beliefs. All of a sudden, that's just not their business anymore. They are just worrying about themselves at this point. Like, that's a big enough job that I don't need to be, ushering this to other people. And then people start responding to them differently. And that grows. It is extremely powerful when I get to work with somebody that I would probably describe as quite entitled. And, I believe in the good in everybody. So when I'm meeting somebody, I'm like, ooh, woo, that is that's a strong personality, but here, let's do it. And they get to transition to a person that entitlement has changed to agency. I see a much more content person.
I love how you describe this, and it's such hope for everybody, that this change is possible once they start to do the work. Because you have in your book talking about this inner work being like a necessity, not a luxury. Why is it you think this?
It's a luxury when you look at life being that you have busy schedules, and you have to shower and grocery shop, and you've got to figure out your work, and if you've got kids, or whatever the details of your life, a lot of our life, we have made things that really aren't necessary to our deeper lives and our deeper world. That becomes the necessity of our life. and thusly the things that really feed our soul become the luxuries. And sexuality has been made that. It's what media has done. It's what our movies and books and everything has done to it. We've made it be this commodity that the chosen few get, and that you are wrong if you are not having it a certain way in a certain amount. And when that becomes unrelatable, we again put into the luxury category, and then you put sex next to good sleep, and especially if it's like mediocre sex, or the relationship isn't great, or you don't feel safe. If it's not optimal, then most people are going to pick sleep over sex, and most people think that those are the only two options to have. That you have to, it's sleep or sex, but sex can happen at other time when you're not going to be sleeping. And I think that sex has a bad PR, and I think sexuality has had an even worse PR. So all of that to say, like, that's the problem. Why I think it needs to be something that is a necessity instead of a luxury is that it's truly, when you do the work within who you are as a sexual being, when you do that work, it is unmistakable how it changes your life, because it is such a difficult place to sit in. It's uncomfortable. It is divisive. It is political. It is scary. It is very intimate, and it's so multifaceted that if you choose to ignore it, and if you choose to only have it be reduced to sex acts, then you are missing a very big part of the capability of knowing the truth of you. And when people don't know the truth of you, like if you don't know it of yourself, or you don't share the truth of you with other people, then I really see, like, I'm lucky enough that part of my job is people really trust me, and they'll tell me the things they don't say to other people. And when people get down to it, the loneliness epidemic, even if somebody is in a relationship, if they have a family, if they have on the outside, they look like they have everything put together. But when I really ask them, how are you? And I care about what the answer is. It's truly an epidemic that people don't feel seen and wanted and valued. And how can you create relationships, and how can you actually take in someone's genuine wanting of you if you don't even know who you are? And I think sexuality is one of the most powerful ways to know who you are.
And I love, it's the phrase you use as well, the final frontier, wasn't it? It was the of self-development. I love that. It's so wonderful. And thank you so much for sharing all of this knowledge as well in your book, and giving us like a guide how we can all do it. Because you speak about the difference really between an expert and a sexpert. And it really strikes me how lacking that knowledge is. So I would imagine this book is like a Bible as well for experts learning as well, who have not, they don't have the sexpertise, right?
Right. Yeah. And in the US, as therapists, we don't have to have one class in sexuality in order to practice. There's only one state that requires it for licensure, and the rest you're on your own to do it. And yet we look at therapists as our trusted advisors in a lot of ways, and therapists are people too. So we're not educated, and if our profession isn't educating us, and it's the same with the medical community too, that we're not given proper sex education, and we're not given the space to work through our own sexuality so that our biases don't affect the people that we're working with. So yes, I hope it becomes. I hope this book really does become the baseline. And I hope that the phrase moves from the final frontier to the first frontier.
Because your expertise is so rare, I have to ask you, like, on a lighter note, when you're at parties, people find you to get photos with you, and people oversharing. Yes.
Yes.
Is there like one thing that people really come in with you at when they see that you're there and they find out what you do?
Yes. And sometimes I lie and say a very different profession so that I don't get it if I just want to be off duty. But yeah, oh, I hear it. I hear it all, and I see that. I know the face. I know I'm about to hear a story. But I guess the good thing is that I love hearing stories, and I'll say, okay, try to tell me something I haven't heard before, because I have heard it all. And I'm like, nope, heard it. I get it. And I say that just because I like normalizing it. But yeah, I have had people come up to me at bus stops, at funerals, at parties, at the grocery. I have, and 99% of the time, I think it's hilarious and great, and I'm glad to be of service to others. And other times, I'm like, okay, dig deep here. And but I have heard some stories over the years, and it's the other thing too is like I love how varied we are as humans. I love hearing what turns people on. I love hearing what people have done, and I love it when someone's interest and activities are different than what I would have perhaps guessed. Even though I know better, I know not to make any assumptions based on anything. I love hearing that, and it makes me realize how much people want to talk about it. That if they just had safe spaces, but right now it's I'll take it at the bus stop.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Listen, thank you so much for taking the time to share all this with us today, and your new book. It's such a wonderful read. And like I said, it's not just because of the content, but the way it's written. You just have such a beautiful way with words. There's so many passages I could read out loud. And just, yeah, all the analogies, everything. It's so beautiful. So thank you so much. And what's the best way, Juliana, for people to get in touch with you, or just to reach out to you? Is it Instagram or?
It is. So Dr. Juliana Hauser on all social media platforms. And if you go to my website, which is Dr. Juliana, I have a newsletter, and people will often respond back to the newsletter, and I get all the responses. But I go through all of my DMs as well, because a lot of people don't want to write something publicly. I get a lot of more messages privately. And then there's a contact me page on my website too, if anyone has any questions and want to know. Thank you so much.
Yeah, hence the best friend with a PhD sexpert. That's brilliant. Listen, thank you so much, Dr. Juliana. It has been so wonderful to chat with you today. Thank you for this beautiful book.
Thank you so much.